Hey Manny. So today I want to share with you this week's internet weather. And this part of the report is the top 10 most probed ports. This is going to be an indication of somebody who's really interested in maybe scanning a particular port. It could be a botnet or a couple of adversaries. Now, actually, if you've been following us week over week, nothing has really changed much. I mean, there's been some movement in the numbers, but these ports are pretty well understood. You could see about half of the activity of probing that we can detect is part of the top 10, whereas the rest of the activity, the scanning activity, kind of falls into this other bucket. So I kind of want to highlight a few things from the most sources probing report. Now this one is a little bit more interesting because it's representative of botnets, and you know how I love botnets. Yep. And tracking them and figuring out really what some of these adversaries are up to. And something interesting here popped up, 8081. Now 8081, it's kind of like this alternate web port, but it's jumped up 170, was in 179th position last week, and it's jumped up 173 places to be number 6 in the number of sources scanning for that port this week. And another interesting port there is 37215. So it's TCP. Both are related to botnets, and I just wanted to show you a little bit more about what they are. So I went ahead and I said, hey, let's see the scan source activity for port 8081 for the last 90 days. And you could see there in June, there was a little bit of a spike. It kind of came and went, but then things kind of petered out. I mean, if you look at it carefully, you'll see that there's less than 500, even less than 250 scan sources per hour for pretty much most of the time. But then suddenly, just a few days ago actually, you could see the sudden rise, and you could see that there's like a peak of up to almost 5,500 devices scanning all at the same time for this port. So I decided to zoom in a little bit at the last 5 days and really try to understand it a little bit more. So I looked at the actual devices and I was trying to figure out, like at 3 points in this progression, what are all of the devices that are scanning, or where are they coming from? I think with the internet weather this week, I really tried to showcase not just the ports that are being scanned, but to give a little bit more of an idea of where is the scanning activity coming from, what botnets are responsible for it, and where do these botnets seem to originate. And one interesting thing that you'll see is that in Africa, there's something that's lit up in yellow from the beginning till the end. From, as you could see, when there were just 369 addresses scanning to now when there's, like 5,000 IP addresses scanning, there still seems to be a concentration. That's actually Egypt. In Egypt, and you could see the botnet grow, but never quite expand out of Egypt. So it's not clear 100% exactly what this is. I did a random sampling of some of the scan sources, and it does appear that there is a specific telecom provider in Egypt that probably has most of these devices that are doing the scanning for this. So it's very possible that maybe there's some kind of equipment that they're providing or something like that, which is it's possible, that it might have become compromised, or somebody discovered a new vulnerability and is now building a botnet of all these devices, which is a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, and I guess you can continue to track that to see where, is this going to maintain, stay at a high level? Is it going to go up, or are we going to see this eventually drop off? And
so we'll keep an eye on it as usual. The other thing I wanted to point out is this port 37215. We've actually, I think, covered this before, or for sure it's been written about before. So this one is related to these Huawei HG532 devices, which have a vulnerability, an old vulnerability from 2017. It was published. And the Satori botnet is actually, I think there was some analysis from NetLab that linked this exploit and the devices that are infected with it to the Satori botnet. And they did some great analysis. But you could see, with The scanning that's going on this port now, when you look back 90 days, it actually started and has been growing since mid-July. So this activity has kind of been ongoing. There's lots of scan SIPs, but I mean, it's it's about 3,000 or so devices that have this. So I said, hey, let me do the same thing. Let me look at the map of all the devices and figure out, are they localized to some region? And it's very interesting. I mean, it's actually very, very interesting to see this, because you could see, they're kind of all over the place, but there are hotspots for sure, which is probably where these Huawei devices probably work with ISPs in certain countries, and they probably, have a large deployment in those countries. So I had to get my geography textbook out for this. That's Ecuador in South America, Tunisia in Africa. That middle part, I guess that's Russia, somewhere in Russia, I'm not sure which region that is, because you can see, I mean, Russia is a huge country. There's obviously China and the Korean Peninsula, all impacted. And if you read all of these write-ups by NetLab 360, you'll notice they've talked about the Satori botnet for many years, definitely for many months, and they've actually have a great article that explains and goes into details of how the malware works, what the capability of the malware is, and exactly the information about this exploit and these devices. So it's interesting to see a resurgence, because when they first wrote this article was actually in January of this year. So it's been like 8 months or so since we've last heard about it, and now we're hearing about it again. It seems like there's an uptick suddenly. And that's all. That's all I have for this week's Internet Weather.
Excellent. Dan was actually bringing sort of a little bit of a twist to the way we normally do Internet Weather, and I think it comes from Stan's background in botnets and his love in botnets today.
I do enjoy reverse engineering malware and figuring out how it works and really getting to the bottom of botnets. So yes, I love it.